Once again, welcome back to a brand new episode of Two Please. I'm your host, Abhin.
And I'm your co-host Rohit. You might spot a third face here with us. We have our friend Atulaa. It's been a long time since we've had a guest on this show, and our longtime friend Atulaa has joined us for this episode. Now we know her for I think almost 10 years now. We've moved around in similar circles of quizzing, and it started from there, and then we just became friends outside of that. She's lived an interesting life. She's going to bring interesting points of view and fresh perspectives to this episode, and that's why we're excited to have her on here. But I also want to hear from Atulaa. How do you feel coming on to Two Please and to discuss what we're going to discuss today, which is the Phoebe Waller-Bridge show Fleabag?
Thanks, Rohit. Thanks, Abhin, for that kind introduction and for having me on the show. To introduce myself quickly, my name is Atulaa. I'm a corporate lawyer and I'm currently based in Taipei. I've been somebody who really enjoys dabbling in consuming pop culture, although I don't spend a lot of time critiquing it or thinking about how it makes me feel. I'm really grateful for this opportunity. I also, tend to enjoy content around. I like thrillers, I like comedies, I like slice of life shows, particularly those, written by women, men written by women, I believe are just a different level of well-written character. So I think Fleabag in particular, I'm excited to discuss because it, checks a lot of those boxes, and it's a series I really, really enjoy. That's really special to me. So yeah, looking forward to being on Two Please. I also really enjoy the show. I believe you guys are simultaneously both the most lowbrow and highbrow folks I know. And I love that you cover similar kinds of content in Two Please. So super excited to be here.
You come for the Scorsese, you stay for the Sanjay Leela Bhansali.
For sure.
And we wouldn't, here's the thing, we wouldn't have it any other way. I don't think Rohit and I would ever have been able to justify a podcast where we don't discuss the lowbrow stuff, because that's where we really thrive. That's our comfort food.
Yeah.
Anyway,
with that, we start with the show.
Let's start the show. So I guess there's only one place to begin. Let's talk about our first impressions of the show. So I discovered Fleabag back in 2016 when I was busy looking up random shows to watch on Rotten Tomatoes. And it had, a 98% on Rotten Tomatoes at the time. I had no clue of what the show was about. And that first episode is such a hook. It really grabs you. And in one afternoon, I binged the entire series. And by the end of it, I was absolutely devastated. I was thoroughly immersed. I found myself gravitating towards a character who, for all intents and purposes, was probably one of the most unlikable people in television history ever. But at the same time, there's something really endearing and grounded and almost real about her. Like this person seemed like someone who would exist in normal life. And given the scenario she has to go through and the people that she has to deal with, and ultimately what price she's had to pay, I remember sitting with that season finale and really thinking about it for a very long time, with no sign of season 2 on the horizon. And now, naturally, Waller-Bridge went on to do a lot of other shows and films. And by the time 2019 rolled around and the second season came out, I'd kind of like taken a step back. And this is just a me problem where I don't tend to engage with media that has a mass hysteria around it. There was a lot of buzz coming around Fleabag at the time, and I don't know if it's an involuntary thing. I kind of take a step back and then just wait for the hype to die down and then go check it out. And that's what I did like 4 years later, as of 3 weeks ago, where I sat and watched season 2 in one evening. And although I must say it is a much lighter season compared to the first, it's still extremely enjoyable. And particularly the first episode, the dinner sequence that unfolds, where everything that could possibly go wrong goes wrong. And it's so wonderfully written, and Waller-Bridge is such a master of her craft that I couldn't help, like, by the end of that first episode being like, wow, okay, I am in for another wonderful season of absolute insanity.
So for me, it was actually quite similar. It's also been around 3 years since I watched both seasons. It's been a while, but its impact has stayed with me, even if specific scenes I don't remember as clearly as you might have been, having you watched it just 3 weeks ago. But I agree with you that the craft in her writing is, kind of what really reels you in, right? Through all of the fourth wall breaking. Fleabag, the character, makes you feel like she's letting you into her thoughts, into her life. And then the end, when you realize how she's, self-sabotaged and messed up her life and, basically listened to all her intrusive thoughts in many ways through her life, you tend to feel really bad for her. She's not living up to some kind of ideal, or she's not like this complete mess that some guy is swooping in and fixing. She has her highs, she has her lows. She's just this every woman who's really funny, messed up, but also, someone you end up rooting for at the end of the day.
No, I agree. I think for me personally, I'm a sucker for fourth wall breaks. So, right off the pilot, I was just like, cool, I'm in, right? And while I'll speak a little more about the pilot when we get to the memorable moments section, it's just end of that first scene, whatever, the cold open, I was like, okay, cool. This is like nothing I've ever seen. If I don't know if you guys recall, it's the whole he tries to uh, he's called the asshole guy, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
the cold open scene ends with her saying,
Do I have a massive asshole?
like, what am I watching? Why do I love? I mean, I was like in, right? I was in for it, and like you said, Abhin, super sharp writing. Again, the fourth wall break kind of makes you part of the scene, makes you a spectator to what's happening in her life. It. I don't know. It just makes it feel more personal. So again, both seasons, I love both of them. Like you rightly said, Abhin, the first season is definitely darker. The second season has the whole pre-storyline. But other than that, it deals with less heft, I would say. I don't mean that in a bad way. But on the whole, both seasons combine excellent television, and like you said, not enough of that is made out there. And to add to what Atulaa said, I think what makes the the show such intriguing watching is the title character, right? She's so layered, and you can see at points the darkness in her bubbles to the top, and then she represses it, and that shows
Yeah.
wonderfully on Phoebe Waller-Bridge's face as well. There are points where you can see that veneer is going to crack, and then she just pulls it back. So it's great watching, just super intriguing to see her inner voice play out. And like you said, she listens to her intrusive thoughts a lot more than usual. And it's a nice way to put it. Like, and all of us have these, right? We're like, should I do this? This is, like you have that thing. Like, no, what, fucking do this.
Yeah.
Most of us choose not to, and she chooses to act upon them. So it's super interesting viewing. So yeah, I'm really excited to dive deep into the themes that we want to discuss, go over the memorable moments. But yeah, first impressions, excellent 2 seasons of television. A quick summary of the first and the second season. Abhin, I'm going to do a shit job of this. So wherever you feel I've missed something, or Atulaa as well, just chip in. Right. So the first season, broadly, like we mentioned, is introduces us to Fleabag. It shows her relationship with her family, which it's a fascinating dynamic on its own. She has
Yeah.
a very interesting relationship with her sister, her father, her stepmother, and her boyfriend, and the random guys that she meets and hooks up with. It also has this bank manager character that, again, they have a very interesting dynamic across the course of the season. We see that she has this guinea pig themed cafe that she used to run with her best friend Boo. And due to a recent personal tragedy, obviously, we see her having to run the cafe on her own, but more importantly, spiral down this road of depression, guilt, self-loathing. It's a complicated and potent mixture of uh, burdens or emotions that she has to sort of shoulder. And again, we see her relationship with her brother-in-law Martin, and the whole thing culminates into this series finale of this bizarre I mean, it's supposed to be a feminist art exhibit, but I feel it's a very bizarre articulation of that. I mean, bizarre for comedic purposes. And
Yeah.
again, things come to a head where Fleabag sees that she's been expected to perform a specific role, a certain role in the exhibition. And yeah, like Abhin said, a major revelation happens at the end of the episode, which is super devastating. And adds impossibly so adds another dimension to her role and her motivations, her tragedy. So that's the first season. Again, I don't want to give too many specific details away there, specific to each episode, but that's the broad theme. Second season broadly continues the same thing. You see the character of Fleabag go down these same roads, make similar mistakes. Yes, there is, in terms of self improvement, there are two steps forward, but there's also one step back. And a big part of the two steps forward is her relationship or her dynamic with the character of the priest, who is a recurring, or I would say overarching character across the second season. Her interactions with him make her a better person, while her demons continue to sort of pull her back. And in the process, her relationships with her family, her sister, her parents, or her dad and her stepmother continue to evolve. And the series finale again ends, I would say, on a bittersweet note. I wouldn't say
Yeah.
it's not necessarily sad. There's some upliftment, but you realize, she still has a ways to go.
Mm-hmm.
So that's broadly the second season.
I mean, yeah, that's pretty all encompassing. And if you miss something out, guys, here's the thing: go watch the show, and then come back to this episode.
Just go.
So, yeah, it's literally you will spend 2 days and you spend 3 hours on it each, and you'll be done. And then this episode is going to be an hour at length minimum. So come back; we're always going to be here for you.
Any behind the scenes stories that you guys know of? Anything about the character, about the show that you feel like you want to share?
I think the big one is just the genesis of the show, right?
Yeah.
They say it was first a one-woman show that Phoebe Waller-Bridge had at the Edinburgh Fringe, and which she came up with, I think, because of a dare or something of the sort. And I've not watched her really talk about, the process of like translating that to television, but I like to think that's kind of where the fourth wall breaking came from, right? This is a character that you've sort of looked straight at your audience and kind of confronted them with like all of its different layers. So I think not doing that in any other medium would have just been just too strange. So I think a part of that just direct communication that it once had while it was a one-woman show, I think carried through as a TV show itself, and I think we're all the better for it.
I don't have any behind the scenes stories. I'm just going to spend a quick minute just like fangirling over Phoebe Waller-Bridge. When sometimes you're in the company of people who are so clearly, outright far wittier, far funnier. You find yourself sometimes in that situation, right? Where like, I'm in the company of somebody, I shouldn't even like say anything. If I was to be around Phoebe Waller-Bridge, I'd just be like, just keep talking. Like, I'll just be
Or
like,
don't talk. I would be
Yeah.
quiet. Yeah.
One of those people, like there's Tina Fey, there's Phoebe Waller-Bridge. If I were to be in their company, I'd just be like, wow, just keep being brilliant, just keep being funny. I just want to hear and like melt into a quiet puddle somewhere.
Yeah, I think Uruj
I love it.
Ashfaq, the stand-up comedian based in Bombay, she put up a what I thought was relatable Instagram post. She was at Edinburgh Fringe recently, and I think won, I think a newcomer award, which is very, very cool. But then she put up this picture with Phoebe Waller-Bridge where she was just like, grinning super wide. You could see all of her teeth, and she was just like, I couldn't say a word. I can't believe I was next to Phoebe Waller-Bridge. And I was like, yes, this is all of us. This is all of us in the presence of Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
I think I would either be super quiet or I would just shout. But yeah, that was by no means a BTS section. That ended up being a fangirling session, but I'm okay with that. Let's move on to our next chapter, which is memorable moments from seasons. What are the things that stand out that you still remember? Like we mentioned, Abhin has seen it more recently, but both Atulaa and I have seen it a while back. What are the things you remember even today?
For me, I think from season 1, it's the last revelation, right? Of course, Fleabag's had a lot of, I think, missteps in her sex life, her romantic life through the course of the first season, and a big incident that happens is the fact that her brother-in-law inappropriately makes a move on her and tries to turn that around on her. But then you realize that, this big not sure if I should give the spoiler away, but you realize
No,
that there's
we're okay with spoilers here.
Yeah.
okay. So and then we discover that a huge incident in her life, the loss of her best friend, happens shortly after her boyfriend cheats on the best friend with Fleabag, and then I feel like it sort of contextualizes all of her, I think, self-sabotage, bad decision making, the fact that she's dealing with hating herself for doing this, the fact that she's also lost her best friend. Like, I think all of those emotions kind of start to make sense. And I think the predominant feeling for her is just like a lot of, you just feel really, really bad for this person, right? And so I think that really stands out for me from season one. From season two, like Abhin said, the dinner is fantastic. It does a great job also, I think, of immediately telling you that she's done some work on herself. She's going to be celibate for a while. She's worked on a relationship with her sister, and and then like she's immediately intrigued by the priest. And there's also some hilarious, crazy moments happening in the course of that dinner, which is just so
Yeah.
typical Fleabag. So I think that, and also I don't know if you guys caught that side of the internet, but Fleabag's jumpsuit in that dinner scene is very, very iconic. It sold out
Yeah.
immediately. I think it's around 40 pounds. In the course of the last 3 years, kept looking it up to see if they delivered to India, but then I was like, no, I don't need that right now. I can't wear it anywhere. But I think it was just a great like power dressing and also great date night outfit that I think caught the internet's imagination. Um, yeah, I think apart from that, another scene that stuck out to me was the one where she goes to therapy, I think on her dad's insistence, and the iconic, incredible Fiona Shaw does a brilliant job in a very, very tiny cameo there. And I think even there, like it's a very great therapy session. I think she makes a breakthrough. She's very uncomfortable, makes jokes to deflect, and then also very quickly gets out the topic of her shame and her I think, indecision very quickly. So I think that's also like a masterclass in great writing. So I think those are the moments that stand out for me.
I think that jumpsuit keeps coming back into, as we like to say on this episode, on this series, the cultural zeitgeist. Every couple of months or so. I think Halloween last year, Paul Mescal and Daisy Edgar Jones went as the priest and as Fleabag for Halloween. So I'm a big champion of Normal People. I love that show. So it keeps that dress. I remember the furrow around the dress at the time. Now, season one, I'd like to add to a couple of things. One, of course, is the opening monologue for season one, where she's standing outside her door or like inside her door, waiting for, as he's called in the script, arsehole guy to come in, and she talks about how, when someone calls you in the 2 o'clock in the morning and asks if you're where you are, and you just kind of, even though you're in bed, you kind of pretend that you just got in, and you have this entire cleaning procedure to make yourself look ready and really get into the mood. It really sticks with you, and it's an instant hook, right? You're like, oh, what is this show? I want to get into it. And then as she's in the act, she's talking to you as the audience, talking about what she's feeling. And even though it's probably the most dissociative aspect of her, it still makes a very engaging viewing as a third viewer. And similarly, another hilarious moment is her relationship with her on and off boyfriend Harry, who she breaks up with, or who he breaks up with her the first time because he catches her masturbating to the Obama speech.
That scene, when I watched, I'm like, what is happening? Oh my God.
It's so bizarre yet so absolutely up my alley, because I'm like, oh, this is exactly the kind of shit I would laugh at. And it's so weird, and I was like, okay, this show is out there, but I'm really glad like it's so out there, because I'm having a lot of fun with it.
It's bizarre, but at the same time, Obama has something, dude. Like, when he talks, I kind of understand. Like, I'm not going to get into more detail, but I kind of understand.
Right.
He has that aura, or
it's the cadence and the timbre of his voice. I kind of get it.
No comment, but you have something there, Rohit. You have a point.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. There was that. There's of course the whole interaction with the bank manager, which begins with this absurd. I still don't know what the motive of what she was thinking when she kind of pulls her top off in the middle of the meeting. And there are so many different varying perspectives on it, which I think we'll get to when we jump into themes. And her generally how that relationship goes, because you think it could go a certain way, but then you realize the bank manager is also harboring some old secrets. And when they're sitting in the cafe and having a conversation, it felt really nice. Then her relationship with Boo, and how initially she does this to just she attempts this whole bus incident to just get herself hurt to make her boyfriend feel bad, but ultimately ends up killing her. And then you at the end of the episode you realize why. And generally it's the characters. I think Claire is a fascinating character who kind of is supposed to have her life together, like the perfect encapsulation of the modern woman, but has these extremely deep rooted insecurities that she just can't let go. She always feels like that she's inferior compared to her sister, and how the world views each of them separately. I think her relationship with her husband, also, who is this raging narcissist, is also a very interesting perspective, because she just can't, whatever happens, she can't bear to leave him, because there's the it's it's the oldest tale in the book, right, about how people stay with what in scenarios that they're comfortable with. And watching that back and forth is a big, what do you call, is extremely engaging television.
Yeah.
As for season two, piggybacking off Atula's point, that the dinner scene is perfect. It's the way the tension builds, because at first, as you're watching the scene, you're like, okay, something is clearly off. Everyone's pretending to be someone they're not, and it's so familiar, because that we've all found ourselves in scenarios like that, where we're at some kind of a dinner where we're all trying to put on a facade and pretending to be that it's okay, pretending that everything's just okay, when really it's not. And as the screw tightens and as things start to go awry, you really start to see the true characteristics of the people at the table. And I think Fleabag handles those juxtaposition of those character traits so well. And that being one, of course, the therapist sequence is the other. And generally the whole the confession booth sequence, in where the priest and her, where she talks to the priest about how she wants someone to tell her what to do,
Mhm.
because she's built this persona of being the strong independent person, but she's ultimately caused so much damage to the people around her and to herself. At this point she's kind of questioning if whether it's the right what she's doing is the right thing, because she just needs some sort of guidance. And how that scene ultimately culminates is also quite hilarious, and in a way quite hot as well, given the tension and the chemistry that the two of them have. So yeah, I think those are a couple of my favorite sequences from the second season. Of course, the whole Claire leaving her husband sequence in the kitchen was beautiful, because Martin has this intense monologue of saying, "I will leave you if you just kneel down and beg me to do so." And for a brief second, you as the audience think she's not going to do it, and then she steps to the
Right.
side, kneels down, and goes, "I am begging you, leave me. I want to leave."
So
I was like,
satisfying.
wow, it's so well done. It's perfectly executed. So yeah, I think those are a couple of my favorite moments.
I think broadly you guys have covered whatever I wanted to say. I guess saying the pilot is, I think, one of the better pilots out there. Gets you hooked on from the get go, and the cold open to the whole Obama scene, to it gives you just about enough of a flavor of who she is at the end of the episode. And again, all of the moments where, for me, what really keeps me hooked onto the show, or kept me hooked onto the show, were moments where I felt her facade was going to break, and I mentioned, like, she pulls it back. Phoebe Waller-Bridge does a wonderful job of that. The Silent Retreat episode is another one where you can see, right, her and Claire are almost going to say what they really want to say. You can see there's a wall between them. It's about to crumble, and it does to an extent, but again, there's a sort of separation between them. It feels like there's a chasm between them that can't be, bridged. There's that episode, the dinner episode, the season 2 opener, I would say, is again one of the best written episodes of television that I have seen. And I think I generally love dinner episodes, right? One, it's almost like a bottle episode because everything's happening almost real time,
Right.
and you can't escape the scene for better or worse.
Yeah.
If it's uncomfortable, you're in that discomfort, right?
Yeah.
Another recent episode, similar dynamic was the one with the bear, right? Which had the whole family dinner episode in the second season. Similar, I mean, bear was a lot more stressful. This was comedic, but same, you're uncomfortable. You're just asked to be as though you're one of the people at the table, and you can see, and we've all been in those situations, like Abhin said, where you would rather be anywhere but there, but you have to
Yeah.
put on appearances, smile at at the right moments, and just make it through the duration of the
Yeah.
meal. So again, great episode, and the priest interactions as well, although again, bit of a confession here, I I didn't get the appeal. So if either of you can explain to me, yeah, Atula, if you can just explain to me what it is that, I mean, I love Andrew Scott, right? And Abhin knows this. I have a weakness for the Irish accent. So I was anyway bought into his character purely because I love Andrew Scott. But what made it? I know there's a lot of chatter on this on the internet. The hot priest discussion. But if somebody can just enlighten me a little bit, what I was missing.
Okay, firstly, Andrew Scott is extremely attractive.
Yeah.
And he has an accent. And he really pulls off that priest robe like no one else can, I'd say. But I also think as the show goes on, he's just somebody who sees Fleabag for who she is, right? Like he's helping her through like the conflicts she's having about how she's living her life. He is so invested in being around her and so attuned, I think, to her presence that he can tell when she's not all there and she's off doing her little internal monologue. So I just think as a partner, as a supportive presence, and as a friend, I think he's just such a fantastic character. And I also think there's always this fundamental, forbidden fruit kind of appeal. I think
Okay.
that is just, I think the pull of that is just too strong,
The,
right?
the
I
whole
think that,
Neil scene plays into that, I guess. It's forbidden fruit, authority, whatever. I mean, is that
yeah.
sort of emotion that it leverages, I guess.
100%. And I also think for her, it's a different, like, she's had this chaotic sex life. She's just gone after, a lot of meaningless flings. She's, been with her friends' partners and things like that. So I think here she, wants something really, really badly, but she's holding back because, she shouldn't, and because she's trying to be a better person. And I think all of that sort of adds to what a special dynamic that is. But it's honestly something you can't put in words. I'm not sure I've done a great job communicating these.
It's a very visceral feeling, essentially.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why Rohit has that thing, because even in me initially I had that same approach, because from what you see of the priest, you clearly see a guy struggling, and his crutch is alcohol. So I think halfway through season 2, I was like, this man is an alcoholic. Like, it seems, because every other scene he's holding a drink in his hand and he's got something or the other going, and they talk about his past, which is not really. I mean, they kind of really mention that he's had a difficult past, and he ultimately turned towards religion to keep him grounded, which is the story of millions who've had a difficult childhood, have had issues with drug abuse, have had issues with alcoholism, who have all turned to religion in some format to as their cornerstone to just keep them grounded and to move on with life. And I think for him, having met somebody, he's on this path and he feels like he's doing so well, and then he meets this one person who he's very attracted to, but is exactly the opposite of what his current worldview is. And so he's struggling with it, and as much as Fleabag is attracted to him, he's very clear that he's attracted to her as well, but he's just trying to push her away so he can continue doing what he believes is the right path, because he feels that whatever path that she's on is just going to lead him to despair. And watching that dynamic unfold, where he kind of like is just trying to wrestle with those feelings, this makes for very intriguing television. Yes, the two have chemistry. At some points, I was like, okay, this is probably the most normal human being that Fleabag has attracted to, because it's very clear that the kind of guys that she picks are dudes who she has no future with and who she can blow up a scenario with and walk away without feeling a lot of guilt. These are people that are generally not very nice people. Even in season 2, the lawyer that she sleeps with, who keeps calling himself a great fuck, and she says, "Oh, he actually is just again a complete asshole." And is there's no really redeeming qualities to them, which kind of makes her feel like, okay, she's doing the right thing, even if these people are incapable of hurting her. I think the only time she actually feels a little hurt is when Harry doesn't come back to her at the end of season 1, because they have this vicious cycle of breaking up and getting back together. And towards the end, I think he says something along the lines of, he's like, "No, I'm not coming back this time, and I think I'm going to see somebody else." So when it comes to the priest, I feel like she feels like this is probably one of the few people whom she senses is attracted to her, but is not doing anything about it, which kind of is again a whole is a big challenge to her current worldview, because whoever in the past couple of years has been attracted to her has always come on to her very strongly. The priest, on the other hand, is giving her the attention, but not the kind that she expects, which kind of throws her world into a tizzy. So I definitely liked the way their two character dynamics clashed, so to speak.
Yeah. And I think as a viewer, it's like every Regency romance there is, right? Like there's
Oh
two
yeah.
people who are extremely well suited for each other. They're flawed human beings, but they bring out they bring out the good sides of one another, but circumstances are keeping them apart. So I
Yeah.
think he's very similar to like the leads in Bridgerton, or even if you guys have watched Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, I kind of think he's similar to Lenny Bruce, right? You see a lot of this chemistry early on, but Midge and Lenny are just so supportive to each other. They're both messed up in their own ways, but you're just something about them tells you that if they were together, they would be so good for each other. And I think that's the dynamic priest and the hot priest and Fleabag have as well.
Interesting. I think that makes things a lot clearer for me. I mean, I was already on board. I just wanted to know why I was on board. Now I have a lot more clarity as to why I liked the character. But great. I think this is as good a segue as possible into our themes discussion, given that we've already sort of started digging into the dynamics of the show. So let's get into it, right? I think the character obviously that merits the most discussion here is Fleabag, the central character. I would say she's probably the most layered, has the most complicated backstory, and there's a lot to unpack here, right? As we mentioned, there's recurring themes of loss, guilt, loneliness across the show, and I feel this, as I mentioned on the group chat as well. I think a lot of her self sabotaging behavior comes from survivors. I mean, it's just not just survivors' guilt. In this case, it's legit guilt because she caused Boo's death in a direct or indirect way. And also survivor's guilt because there's a very strong element of codependency in their relationship, right? I this is something at a personal level I've always been wary of, which is to not have a friendship which is in that sense all eggs in one basket. It's all or nothing, where
Yeah.
put all of your energies into having that one friend, which is, it's always good to have very deep friendships. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but it should not get into that codependency territory where, if they were, for whatever reason, it need not be death. You could have a blow up with your friend and they're not in your life anymore, and your sense of self is so deeply ingrained into that relationship. If it's an unhealthy degree, you see that play out. The effect it has on Fleabag, Boo's death is very clearly unhealthy because of the extent to which her sense of self was tied into that relationship, right? So again, all of these things, all of these themes play out across the course of the show. And like Atulaa mentioned, those intrusive thoughts, that self-sabotaging behavior that she gives into, really drives not just the plot forward, but also her course of, or her path to betterment, or lack thereof. So again, some of the themes that I thought we should get into. What do you guys think?
I think a big theme is a lot of what she does is driven by loneliness, right? At some point she needs to make that transition into accepting that she deserves to be happy. Like, she's done a lot of chaotic things. She's a very morally ambiguous person. But, at some point she needs to tell herself, hey, it's okay that I deserve to be happy. I deserve to have a person, and I should be vulnerable with that person. And I think that could also be one of the reasons why she had just one best friend, right? Like, she struggles with getting vulnerable, letting her like deeper self be known to other people, which is why she has a lot of meaningless flings and doesn't wait to stay around to get hurt. One of the few times she does that is when she confesses her feelings to the hot priest. But I think a lot of what she does is driven by just being lonely, wanting to ignore what's going on in her life through a series of meaningless flings and actions that she can like distract herself with.
Actually, that just brings an interesting thought to my mind, which is how different was she probably before Boo's death, right? Because
So
I'm
I
sure a
think
lot of those behaviors also come from her upbringing, being like they say motherless daughters, right? So that's again
So I think a lot of
interesting.
that, yeah, a lot of that stems from. So I think by the time she and Boo are around, and I think what really forces her to move towards Boo, I mean, to get closer to Boo, is because the death of her mother, which is addressed over both seasons, and the impact it has on her and her family. Because as her dad says, "I love you, but I don't like you." So she was always much closer to her mother than she was to her father, and she's really struggling with grieving. And I think even on the day of her funeral, or the day of her mother's funeral in season two, there's a great scene about how she feels like she looks great, and everybody who keeps coming to the funeral keeps talking, complimenting her, saying, "You look wonderful. Grief really agrees with you." And she's in this. She's obviously in like a messed up place. She's grieving and she's looking at herself, and she looks great. And the one thing about Fleabag, and that what really stands out, is that is self-deprecation. I mean, the show is called Fleabag. The character is called Fleabag. She doesn't really have a name. She calls herself Fleabag. So clearly, this character has, much like all of us, we're our own harshest critic, but more so in this scenario, where she doesn't believe she's capable of any good, and so she picks this life that she's just going to um, live, where she kind of keeps everybody at an arm's length, and kind of she puts all, like Rohit said, she puts her eggs in the codependency basket with Boo, and that's so commonplace these days. That happens with friends, that happens with parents, when codependent parents and parent-children relationships are extremely problematic and have been for quite some time. So it's just it's a very interesting dynamic, because once you move one part of that equation out of the picture, you're just left with this person. You're leaving this person with this massive vacuum to fill, where you've invested so much of your self-worth into this relationship, and now that it's gone, where do you go from here? And why do you want to open yourself up? Much like any relationship, really, like you want to open yourself up to somebody new and go through that entire exhausting experience with them. How does one is that the more preferable thing, rather than just like completely shutting off and engaging in meaningless encounters with people who aren't shit? So it presents a very, very interesting conversation. And I think another thing it does really well is that it shines a great light on modern day feminism. Now, the thing with feminism and with patriarchy, because patriarchal values have ruled society for years, they both expect women to behave in a certain way. And I think Fleabag kind of shines a light on both sides. But the patriarchal aspect is where you need to be certain way, you need to like dress and talk to a certain in a certain manner. And whereas on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have like feminist values where you need to be this infallible character, where that can take absolutely anything and have criticism bounce off you like rubber arrows. And I think Fleabag talks about how at points that you can still have agency of your own character while still going through absolute shit. You don't need to be this girl boss type who has everything under control. You could be a total mess, but at the same time, you can control your own narrative. And I think that's a very interesting perspective. At times, she critiques, she pokes fun at certain scenarios, saying, "Oh, we wouldn't be feminists if we were better looking," and at the same time, they poke at the patriarchal value system as well. So it's a very sharply written show that really explores these themes very well, and yeah, I think very few shows are capable of doing such a feat.
Yeah, that's absolutely what makes it so relatable as well, right?
Mm.
I don't think the average woman would relate specifically to Fleabag's life circumstances, but the
Hmm.
fact that, say, she has not followed the set mold of, corporate career, marriage, kids, right? Or the fact that she's going through life not having all of the answers, right? Like you do think, okay, I need to be this strong, independent woman, but I also feel different ways sometimes, right? Or
Yeah.
I think I'm this body positive person. I know that everybody is beautiful, attractive in their own way, but also have your own set of insecurities at the same time. So I think, yeah, I've said this before, but I think the fact that she's in every woman, right? Like she
Yeah.
goes through the same, I think, mental whirlwinds that a lot of women do, and she's figuring things out. Her issues bigger than most, I think, for most people, but I think that's what makes it such a great show as well.
And I think what really the juxtaposing her against Claire makes it
Yeah.
makes for more engaging viewing, right? Because Claire is supposed to, like I mentioned previously, Claire is supposed to be the perfect person. She's got a great job, she's got a family, she's getting awards, or like
She has amazing
she's got
skin also.
skills. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she has this weird French haircut, and the only other and person that manages to fall in love with her is a dude named Claire, which so she's probably some sort of some sort of allegory for her being some sort of a narcissist as well, because the only one capable of loving you is yourself. But whatever. But in spite of all of that, and she looks at her sister, who absolutely does not have her life together and is still jealous and envious of the attention that she gets, which shows that I don't think, like, no matter how society views you, ultimately we are extremely cruel on ourselves, and I don't know how that ever changes, because, or rather, it's a long journey towards just being better to yourself, and I think even the show kind of teaches you that as it progresses through both seasons.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's just their expression of feminism here is just letting women be whoever they are. It's not
Exactly.
putting them in specific boxes, because, like you said, Claire's one kind of a woman. Fleabag is a different kind of woman. Olivia Colman's character, the godmother,
Yeah.
is a flawed woman, but she's her own woman nonetheless, right? And again, none of them are expected, or maybe they are expected to adhere to certain standards or kinds of being, but they don't. The characters don't adhere to them. They're very their own beings. Like the whole show that Olivia Colman's her exhibition that is the end of the first season. It might seem weird to me, right? Whatever. Like it's a classic case of fucking anything is art, right? You put an interpretation to anything and call it art. That's how I saw that episode. Like, okay, cool. You want to put a feminist spin on it? I can reason my way into or out of any piece of art. But cool. I mean, that's who she is, and the show lets her be that. They don't specifically. Yes, there is some comedy mined out of the fact that her artwork is quite honestly bizarre at times, but that's not central to her character. She is her own thing. She does her own thing. So I really find
Yeah.
that aspect
I
refreshing.
think what's even better is that it doesn't think that, you living your life a certain way insulates you or ignores you from being called out for doing bad things, right? Like, I think the show makes perfectly clear, yes, Olivia Colman is a sex positive artist who, has like a community of diverse people around her, but she's also, a mean person who is not very nice to her aging husband and, is not very nice to his daughters. I think it doesn't it doesn't get caught up in these big statements of, like, girl boss, women can do this, women can do that. It's just like we're all, we're flawed people, we're living our lives, and our acts have impact on the people around us, and everyone's just trying to figure life out and make it work. Just one comment on the sister relationship, though. I loved it. I think it's fantastic. Very, very, very well. It brings out, I think, the complexities of just having somebody you love so, so deeply, but also have extremely strong feelings about. Whoever said the most complicated relationship in your life is with a romantic partner, right? I think you'll find many, many siblings say that about their siblings. And I think for her, what it is she's actually performing not just, successful corporate role. She's also performing a lot of care work. I think a part of what keeps her in that marriage is the fact that, there's this stepson. He's very emotionally reliant on her. She needs to go deliver his clarinet or, musical instrument and all of that. So, she's feeling this need to perform like all of these different roles of femininity. And I think what I think makes her jealous about Fleabag's life is not really the attention that she's getting, but also just the freedom
Yes.
with which she's leading her life, right? Like bucking all of these expectations and being like, what, I'm just not going to think about it. I'm just going to do it, which is kind of why at the end, I think she finds courage to leave her marriage and go off on this relationship with a hot Finnish man. So I think that relationship is beautiful.
We're all three elder siblings here, right? We know exactly how that feels. That the
Yes.
younger ones get to do whatever they want.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
the older ones have. Yeah, we've all been there.
We're expected to tick certain boxes and not do certain things.
Agreed.
The other thing that I wanted to just draw attention to when you mentioned loneliness, I feel loneliness is not just a theme that is valid when it comes to just Fleabag. You can see all of them are lonely in their own way. Uh, when the whole, I think this again, this is it the season 1 finale where her dad breaks down and says he's not necessarily happy with Olivia Colman's character, and she doesn't necessarily treat him well all the time. So he's lonely in his own way. Fleabag obviously is. Claire has her own demons to deal with, which, yes, she does get help from Fleabag occasionally, but there are a lot of things that she has to deal on her own. So everyone sort of feels like they're in their own silos, and oftentimes you just catch yourself looking at the screen like, guys, just talk to each other, like just open up, right? You can help each other so much more if you're there for each other, as opposed to just trying to figure everything out on your own, which also again unfortunately resonates a lot with all of us in our own lives, right? I'm sure there are relationships which would be a lot easier if we just opened, or if the other person opened themselves up a little more, but for whatever reasons we find ourselves withholding or the other end. So I felt loneliness is not just specific to Fleabag here; it's a larger theme of the show. I don't know how you
No,
guys
I
feel.
fully understand it, and I can speak from someone who moved, and I don't know how much of this is true for you, Atala, but when you move to a different city, loneliness plays a huge factor because it's a new environment. You're so unfamiliar to your surroundings, and it's even if you surround yourself with a bunch of friends, there's a weird part of you that's still empty, and you realize that it's not just you who's facing it. A lot of people are, and what you can do at the most is probably just ask them if they're okay, if they're going through a good time, and most people will talk to you about it. But the fact that none of us ask this question to most people, because you just assume that everyone's fine, everyone's doing better than you are, um, and you make yourself feel further miserable about it. It's uh, it's this vicious cycle that we're all stuck in. And I've noticed this where I had a friend. I reached out to him I'd spoken to him a couple of years ago, and I said, "Are you okay?" And suddenly the night went from us just chilling and watching a show to having a really deep conversation about where each of us was in our lives, and our insecurities, our issues, whatnot. And I think people are willing to talk right now, given there's so much pressure, both internal and external, with the world, that you always feel like you're trying to play catch up, no matter where you are in life, and that can be a very alienating feeling. And I think the show really captures that aspect very well.
Everyone is figuring out their own battles, right? You
Yes.
can think that somebody's life looks perfect on Instagram or generally from the outside, but, everyone is figuring out their own battles. Everyone is figuring out their own battles, right? You can think that somebody's life looks perfect on Instagram or generally from the outside, but, everyone is figuring out their own battles. everybody is fighting their own demons and just trying to make sense of the chaos of life. And we should just communicate that more to each other.
Awesome. I think one last point that I wanted to quickly touch upon, which I found interesting given the way the rest of the show plays out, is Abin, like you mentioned, how the priest is very vocal and open about religion being his way out of whatever mess he was in before they met, right? Now, again, I'm not privy to Phoebe Waller-Bridge's personal beliefs about religion, but from the way the rest of the show is written, doesn't feel like somebody who's like super religious. Again, this is not to say that liberal thought and religion necessarily have to be antithetical to each other, but she feels like a liberal writer who doesn't really dip into religion as much. I'm just wondering what caused her to include this sort of viewpoint, right? Which is to say, show religion in this strongly positive light for a particular character. I just found that very fascinating. That aspect of the background of the priest character I found very fascinating, and I just wonder, what caused her to sort of weave that into the story in this manner.
Well, I think it's just the fact that for millions of people around the world, it is that crutch, right? It it is probably the most influential force we have in terms of just how many people it quantitatively um, takes into its midst. And I think for all of these people, religion is that symbol. Like, this is what makes them feel better, makes them want to be better, gives them a template on how to live their lives. So I think ignoring it in like a deep examination of, there's a bunch of people, they all want to be better, they're figuring out and like trying to leave a lot of issues behind. What are the ways in which they do this? Some people quick escape, some people just force fit yourself into like these narrow boxes. For some people, just that is this big force of organized religion, right? So I think it's only likely and it's only natural that it's possible that you meet somebody for whom this has been such an impactful force.
I
And
guess I was. Sorry, go on.
I also think she does, I think, recite hymns from memory when she visits him in church for the first time. So I don't know what Fleabag's religious views are, but maybe she's like a lapsed religious person or maybe just a non-practicing religious person.
No, I guess. I also think maybe I was interpreting it given I was looking at it from my lens, right? Because I'm not super into religion, so
Yeah.
maybe my biases were playing into my point of view. Fair enough. I think that.
I think generally what happens is, and listen, I'll speak from my personal perspective. So I have a partner who's a lot more spiritual than I have ever been, and I've never like been in the kind of person that looked towards religion for some sort of like grounding factor. And I kind of viewed people who did that in a certain light until I met my partner. And over the years, it has taught me to understand and to appreciate how people, what do you call, are um, choose to lean on different kinds of systems for their comfort or for their support. Me, I don't necessarily have to cater to the belief system. It's not something I particularly find myself doing. But do I understand or do I respect it enough because I care and love my partner so much? Absolutely. And I think that's similarly the case with Fleabag here, because she feels that the religion is such a core part of the hot priest's philosophy. She tries to do her best to make her partner feel like she's seeing him for who she is, and she's making the effort to be a part of his world. While not necessarily being somebody, she does not strike me as someone, as Rohit pointed out, someone who is extremely religious or even thinks about it. The falling portrait gag of Jesus Christ is wonderful. That every time something unholy is about to happen, the portrait falls. It's a great running gag. Mm, But yeah, I just feel like it comes down to the whole idea that when you really care for your partner, and you kind of go to an extent where you want them to feel like uh, like they're being understood.
Sometimes I wish, I did believe in a dude in the sky who'd, tell me how to live life and fix things for me, right? Because do I want to have existential crises with no, rule book on how to get out of it? No, it would be great to actually feel that kind of a strong sense of belief about something. But this also reminds me of this one, I think, webcomic strip I saw many, many years ago, where there's this, character who looks up at the sky and says, God, you're just a crutch. And then the voice in the sky says, yeah, well, you're lame. So I think that I really think that is the equation for a lot of people, and possibly
And I
what.
think it helps to unburden some of the agency, right? So you're able to
Yeah.
place, people use it to place blame or say, hey, some things are out of my hand. When
Yeah.
if you look at it purely scientifically, nothing is out of your hand. I mean, yeah, things, not everything is out of your hand, but there's no proven higher power. And there's no concrete proof. But yeah, it helps people navigate or cope with things a little better, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to bring that point up. Anything else you guys want to table? Any other point you feel you missed?
Because we all enjoyed Fleabag so much. Do you guys have suggestions for other kinds of movies or series that are similar or make you feel a similar way?
I think we should briefly talk about Crashing, the other Phoebe
Yeah.
Waller-Bridge show. I know you want to.
Yeah. Yeah. So Phoebe Waller-Bridge also, I think, now has a track record of writing super complex characters who I think have a lot to fix in their lives and are working on that path. And Crashing, I think, was like a short and sweet example of that. I think it predated Fleabag. I'm not sure,
Yeah, I
but
think it's a
it's
couple of years.
yeah, and it's about a group of friends. It's sort of like Friends. They all live in, shared housing together, but it's way darker and way more messed up than Friends is. But
Isn't it like
also
a
very
condemned
funny.
hospital or something? They live in like a, yeah,
Exactly. It's six people who get greatly subsidized rent and I think like a small monetary incentive for living in like this condemned hospital. And,
yeah.
it's about their interpersonal relationships and how some of them develop feelings for each other and how they cross wires and things like that. I don't want to spoil it, but I think if you like Fleabag, Crashing is, and you don't want to fill the Fleabag shaped void in your life, definitely check out Crashing.
Yeah. But I think other than that, I don't know of a show which has it's a very unique vibe that Fleabag has. It's very hard
There's
to
another
capture. Yeah.
there's another very interesting show a couple of years ago. I haven't seen it in quite some time. It's called Casual, and it's written by Jason Reitman, and I think it's a story about this brother and his sister, and the sister is undergoing a divorce, and so I think she and her daughter are staying with the brother. The brother is this multi-millionaire dude who founded a dating app, but just has no luck in relationships. And it's a very dysfunctional family that's going through a particularly hard period in their lives. So I've it's been a while, so don't quote me on the exact plot scenario, but it again takes the whole dysfunctional relationship dynamic that people have and throws a funny spin on it. So definitely worth checking out. In terms of like Fleabag, is you probably classify her as an anti-hero.
Hmm.
So if you want someone who is like, if you want to go for a show that's in the anti-hero mold, I highly recommend checking out Unreal. Now, there's nothing really funny about Unreal, but it's a hell of an engaging show with two great female leads. And it's about basically the production team behind the shows like The Bachelor and what they do to get ratings and what they do to form a narrative. So when people walk onto shows, they they immediately label certain characters. One of the girls is going to be a bitch. The vamp. One of them is going to be the country girl. One of them is going to be the city girl who's been through trouble. They kind of like manipulate the narrative, ask these girls to do weird things to where they can get in front of the camera and ultimately win the entire thing. And just how much of their own humanity the producers have to forego to uh, to just get better ratings. So very well written characters. I think Constance Zimmer is excellent on that show. You'd probably recognize her as Dana Gordon from Entourage for those of you who've seen her. So it's something definitely worth checking out.
when you were speaking, Abhin, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend came to mind, which is also,
Yes. Hmm.
if you want to watch something where, like a 30-something is just going through random things that happen to her and around her. Crazy Ex-Girlfriend is hilarious. It's also musical, so it's
Yeah.
a very fun watch. Rohit, I'd recommend you watch this clip of a song called "Don't Be a Lawyer." You might want to show it to Poonam also. It's a very funny show and a very funny song. So I think
I will.
that's
I
also
will.
a recommendation I have.
That also reminds me one more. I think nice. All these shows are now coming out. I don't know if either of you have watched Russian Doll. It stars
Uh,
Natasha Lyonne, who was famously there
yes.
in Orange Is the New Black. Again, 30 something, complicated character, very flawed, but at the core, likable. Obviously, the Russian Doll plotline is a little sci-fi, and there's a whole time loop thing, etc. But the central character, again, similarly interesting, flawed, multifaceted. So if you guys haven't checked that out, you should. I mean, I've only seen half of the
And
first season. I'm making my way through it, but it's very nice.
and I think the one other show I'd like to add, given characters who are self-deprecating assholes, is a show on was on FX a couple of years ago called "You're the Worst," and
Uh,
it's such a that first season is wonderful. It's these two people who are going through a different time, a difficult period in their lives, who meet at a wedding, and then just continue to see each other on and off, and are just the absolute dicks to each other. But there's that they have such great chemistry, and they keep coming back to each other after having gone through things that they're going through in life. It makes for super engaging viewing. I followed it right to the end. Aya Cash is great on that show. If you've seen her in any of the other films and shows that she's done, she played what is that girl in The Boy? She plays
Stormfront.
Stormfront. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So she plays. She was on that, but I will always know her as that girl from You're the Worst. It's a great show for those of you who are looking for that Fleabag itch that you want to scratch.
I think we've had a great discussion, short and sweet. I mean, by our standards, anywhere around the 1 hour mark is fairly short and sweet. But I think we've discussed the themes that we wanted to discuss. Like I said, Atula's inputs were far smarter than mine and Abhin's, like I predicted. So
Yeah. Mm.
very fun conversation. Atula, thanks so much for joining us. I know you. I think you flew back in today morning, right? So this is like I'm guessing it's been a very long day for you. But I'm so glad you made the time and were able to join. Uh, but yeah,
Thanks, Rohit. Thanks, Abhin. Super fun discussion and look forward to more.
Cool. We will be back next week for a new episode. Until then, stay tuned. Tell us what you thought of the episode. Tell us if you liked it. Tell us what you'd like for us to improve. And if you've made it thus far, please just follow, like, share the podcast with whoever you want to. It really helps us and particularly me sleep a lot better. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.
bye bye.
See you guys. Bye.